Here is another incredibly nice story on how biology manages to find loopholes in nature's rules, and this is in the context of exactly what happens when tropical forests are logged. So this study basically looked at the Bornean forests for various things which we will read in a minute, in old growth forests that were not logged, and forests that were twice logged, and forests that have been converted to palm oil, for example, or heavily logged, and so on. And then they look at the energetics of ecosystem functions of birds and mammals and try to compare how the energetics in terms of consumption of energy, which corresponds to biomass, and generally the health of the ecosystem. And the basic message is amazing, that actually logging, when it's not a completely destructive one, like let's say converting to agriculture or palm oil plantation, or allowing roads to come in and allowing hunting to go on and so on, can actually increase the ecosystem energetics. This is an incredibly interesting and important message, because this indicates that there may be ways of sustainably logging old growth forests, and in fact have co-benefits that are quite unexpected. So let's go through some of these things. Maps of the study sites in Sabah, Borneo. So A to D are, A is here, B, C, D. Maps showing locations of NPP, net primary production plots, biodiversity surveys in old growth forests in the dark green color, logged forests in the lighter green color, oil plantations in stability of altered forest ecosystem project landscape, A in Maliu Basin, B in Danam Valley, C so I hope, okay. So A was the altered forest ecosystem project, Maliu Basin is B, Danam Valley is C. These are the plots of various quantities, and Sepilok is in D, and you can see the sites here in the inset zoomed out. So A, B, C, D, and it's very interesting to look at how they all collected the data. More than 140, I think almost 150 species of birds and over 100 species of mammals. So they had camera and trap grid, camera stations, bird point count, bat harp trap, net primary production plots, old growth forests, twice logged in this light green color and heavily logged in this lighter green color, and the white regions, for example, here are all palm oil plantations. Okay. The summary, the news and views article provides a couple of nice plots that I included here. The effects of logging on birds and mammals in tropical forests. So old growth forest and logged forests. Already the results are quite striking when you look at them. Birds insect eating, in terms of number of species, smaller in the old growth forests and larger in the logged forest. Not at all intuitive or what you would expect. Plant eating birds similarly, smaller in the old growth forest and increased in the logged forest. So in the logged forest, when it's not a complete destruction, openings happen, there is more sunlight, and the new growth that happens has more palatable leaves, more energy is put into the foliage and so on, that the species can eat, and there are insects that are available for insect eating birds, and the birds, so they do their work in terms of removing the pests that would destroy the trees and such. Mammals, all types, number of species, again smaller for the old growth forest, and logged forest has slightly increased, statistically significant increase in mammals. This is from insects, so this is the energy consumed in kilojoules per meter squared per year from insects for the old growth forest and the logged forest. So they did the energetics calculations, and there are some technical details you can go and look up, and then they do these Monte Carlo simulations to check whether these are really significant and not just noise and so on. So very nice study that quantifies these results. And the energy consumed from plants also for the old growth and logged forests, significantly higher for the logged forests, and energy consumed from plants for mammals. These are the birds, these are the mammals, and you can see again massive increase, more than double the energy consumed from plants in mammals as well. Obviously that corresponds directly to the health of the ecosystem overall. There are formal definitions of health which I won't go into. Typically you think of biodiversity, complexity, that's biodiversity, resilience, their ability to recover from shocks, and productivity, which is, let's say, the overall carbon sequestered in net primary productivity, and then the biomass of the species that are dependent on this biomass, or NPP. Okay. Second figure shows the great kukal in Malaysian Borneo. This bird, one of the species studied in the paper that we are looking at, was found to consume more energy in logged than in unlogged forests. So that's pretty amazing. Okay, so just the diet quality and so on are improved and better in the logged parts. There are other studies in the Amazonia which have looked at how strip logging affects rainfall, and it turns out that the logged parts actually have changes in energy fluxes between the land and the atmosphere in such a way that the evapotranspiration from the forest part tends to give moisture to the logged parts, and the rainfall tends to increase on those parts. But these are all very region specific, not tested everywhere, so you have to be always careful. So this study focused on Borneo in the tropical forests in a very heavy rain region. Has to be obviously validated in other regions where typically tropical forests do have lots of rain, but you have also differences in them across the tropics, right? So I'm sure eventually this will get tested and assessed elsewhere. This is looking at variation of ecosystem energetics along the disturbance gradient from old growth forest, so OG is old growth forest, to logged regions, and this is the oil plantations, palm oil plantations. So things being looked at: net primary production in megajoules per meter cube per year. People do it in kilograms. Chlorophyll, for example, is done in milligrams per meter cube, but you convert it to net primary production. There are some factors involved which can convert it into energy units. And body mass and the number of species here, energy intake in megajoules per meter squared per year, similar units, and the birds and mammals, and similarly percentage of NPP for birds and mammals. And you can see that when you look at fine root, woody, leaf, and reproductive, so they split the vegetation into leaves, twigs, and reproductive parts. So you can see that in the old growth forest, the net primary production is smaller than in the region of logged forest. In the oil plantations, obviously these are manicured gardens for having highly reproductive parts, which are the cash crops for oil and so on. But you can see that there is also higher uncertainty, and they have a way of computing these 95th percentile kind of uncertainty using Monte Carlo simulations and so on, which I'm not going to read, but you can go ahead and do it. For example, error bars denote 95% confidence intervals derived from 10,000 Monte Carlo simulation estimates incorporating uncertainty in body mass, population density, the daily energy expenditure equation, assimilation efficiency of the different food types, composition of the diet of each species, and net primary production. So obviously there is significant amount of modeling involved, which is very normal because we don't measure things like net primary production directly. Neither can we directly measure the energy of the consumption, so we have to convert them from amount of the food that is consumed into energetics. Nonetheless, you can see that body mass in grams per meter squared of species, birds, this is the body mass of all the species. Old growth forests smaller, more than double in the logged part of the forest, and it drops again to actually a little bit less than old growth forest when you have palm plantation. So converting forest to palm plantation is a bad idea. There are also obviously similar things happening when you convert it to agriculture or build roads and bring in hunters and so on and so forth, which is not looked at here. So if you look at the number of species, again, old growth has more than oil plantation, but less than half of the logged forest. So incredible results, which has to be obviously kept in mind when we worry about deforestation, forest perturbations, logging, and rethink the whole idea of whether logging can be done sustainably while also increasing energetics of the ecosystems that depend on them. So this is the energy intake. Similar story when you look at the various species of birds and mammals, invertebrates, vertebrates, fruits, seeds and nuts, leaves and nectar. So old growth forest smaller, larger in the logged parts, and lower, smallest in the oil plantations. And similarly for mammals, just make sure of that. D and E, so birds and mammals. So this is the percentage of net primary production consumed in the three categories of land use for birds and mammals, and the story remains the same, that logged regions show increased percentage of NPP being consumed by birds and mammals. There are further nice details here looking at the energetics. So you are looking at magnitude and species diversity of energetic pathways in old growth forests, logged forests, and oil palm. So you're looking at mammals, birds, and food consumption in kilojoules per meter square per year, 150, 300, and 450. And the message is loud and clear again. If you look at arboreal insectivores in the old growth versus logged forests, massive increase. Arboreal omnivores, again large increase. And little bit of an increase in arboreal frugivores, and same for arboreal omnivores. Flying insectivores, not such a big difference, but there is a small increase. You have terrestrial insectivores, terrestrial herbivores, terrestrial omnivores, and terrestrial frugivores or granivores, all showing an increase, and of course it decreases as you convert the forest into palm oil plantation. So palm oil, bad news, especially because they tend to actively destroy forests, or there are examples in Indonesia of looking at El Nino forecasts and setting fires and then blaming it on El Nino, because during an El Nino there is dry weather over the maritime continent and there are natural wildfires, but the forecast can be misused to set fire and then convert it into palm oils and so on. So this is a menace that has to be watched out for. Finally, these are the changes in energy consumption by species in logged forests and oil palm relative to old growth forests. So there are positive changes. So they are looking at 20 species with the largest positive and negative changes. The darker colors are birds. I think let's make sure. I always read them and then I forget. Bird species are shown in lighter tone and mammal species are shown in darker tone. So darker colors here and here. So these are reductions in energy intake compared to old growth forests. These are increases, and the message again is that the top 20 species of birds and mammals show much more increase in energy intake compared to old growth forests. There are a few species which show a little bit of reduction, but in the oil palm, while there are increases, there are only far fewer species with increased energetic intake compared to logged forests, and there are many more with reduced energy intake compared to old growth forests in the palm oil plantation conversions compared to logged forests. So I hope this gets much more analyzed, much more modeled, etc., to look at how these incredible results can be used for sustainably managing tropical forests, and not just jumping up and down saying any logging is bad. So this obviously has to also be looked at other regions in the mid-latitudes where logging still happens, of course, and I'm sure it will be looked at, and also I'm sure this will begin to get a lot of responses with data from other regions and so on. But nonetheless, this is definitely worth looking at more carefully. If you want, go and read the paper. Okay.